Always ready.
Okay, we good to go?
Mm-hmm.
Always good to go.
I'm just chilling at Canada Life Center.
That's the hard-hitting
why.
analysis you listen to the Level Flight podcast for.
Here we go.
Jets are a brisket team, low and slow for the first two periods, and boom, an explosion of flavor in the last few minutes of the third.
Doing all right. Better if my internet would work.
Elliot.
This is comedy. I'm Brian. I'm joined by Connor.
Hello.
And Elliot.
Hey. Wow, that was fun.
You're listening to the Level Flight podcast. And welcome in, everyone. Welcome back. It's been weeks, but we are here. Level Flight podcast, episode 99, the Wayne Gretzky episode, retired everywhere. People probably thought we retired because it's been like a full month since we uploaded anything. But we're here because something finally happened worth talking about. It wasn't Cole Perfetti like we all predicted in the final LFP Live before we took our break to end season 2, which, by the way, welcome to season 3 of the LFP. But Rutger McGroarty was traded. Didn't anticipate it. I was at the lake. I wasn't ready for it. How inconsiderate of them. But before we get into everything with that, Connor, how are you?
Doing great. Summer's going great. I've missed that intro and being on LFP, being on the mic. It's been a long time. But you know what? To our credit, there was nothing to talk about. So I'm glad something finally happened, brought us out of the woods, home from the lake, and we're here to talk about Rutger McGroarty being traded to the Penguins, and then the Jets getting back Brayden Yager. I'm super pumped to finally talk about it because I haven't had the chance to really dive into my thoughts.
Yeah, like I did a little bit of a breakdown on it for the Hockey Writers. Shameless plug, obviously. So I did a little bit of that. This was before the Kevin Cheveldayoff press conference, which answered some questions. So my piece is a little bit of some sort of out-of-date information, but the overall feeling of it is the same. But before we get into the Chevy presser, I want to know your thoughts on the deal itself.
Yeah, I mean, shocking. I mean, like you said, you're at the lake. You weren't expecting it. We all kind of expected it at the draft, but here we were, middle of August, for another prospect taken 14th overall the year before. Like, I just didn't think that would be how the trade looked. But the original notification from Elliot Friedman said that Pittsburgh is acquiring Rutger McGroarty. And I flipped over to Puckpedia now, not cap friendly, but flipped over, looked at their roster and went, who could this possibly be? Like, what could this be for? I mean, they had their picks. So if they wanted to do picks, great. If they wanted to solve their 2C problems and get 38-year-old Evgeny Malkin, I didn't think the Penguins were going to do that, but like, it wasn't going to be Crosby or Carlson or any of their big name players. So I just had no clue. And then shout out Nick Lynham. He put on Twitter, "This is Brayden Yager, right?" Or something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, totally. Like, Saskatoon player, plays for Moose Jaw, taken a year later, same pick, just a year younger. He's 19 years old. But honestly, I'm interested to get your thoughts as well, because Chevy backed into a corner once again, and I'm coming away from this trade almost pleasantly surprised at how well he did again. That, like, who won the trade is going to be solved 6-7 years from now, right? Like, it won't be solved today with what we're saying, but the fact that he was able to trade it for another prospect who's just a year younger, taken in the same spot, maybe a little bit worse at this time, but Rutger's a year older, so he's had a full year to develop. Like, I think there's a lot to like about this deal, even though it's just a simple 1-for-1. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I think too, like, I did the same thing as you, where I initially thought, who could this possibly be for?
Yeah.
And I mean, off the top of my head, I knew the Pittsburgh prospect class, aside from Yager and maybe Koivunen, not great. So my hopes were Yager, and obviously that ended up happening. And I like how you put it there, where you won't really know in terms of who won the trade until you actually see them, flourish as NHL players. But, as you put it, there are way worse ways to get out of this, and Chevy did not do that. Like, when you back into a corner, and this has now happened several times, I'd prefer it if it would stop. But
Yeah.
he has now been backed into a corner so many times, and every single time he has come out either even or ahead. And I think that is, a fantastic, piece of work there. And I don't recall the last time two teams have swapped their top prospects. Do you?
No. And someone put on Twitter, like, when was the last time two players taken at the same pick were taken or traded for each other a year apart, like the 14th pick, two drafts apart? Like that's ridiculous. And there's so many similarities here, which makes it feel like it's an even swap. But it's not. Like, I see why Pittsburgh is doing this, because they're getting the older, more NHL ready player who's had 2 great years in college and is able to theoretically able to step into an NHL lineup right now. Brayden Yager, maybe not at that level. Maybe he needs 1 more year in the CHL, and then maybe a year of AHL, or maybe he's going to be ready for the NHL this year. We don't know what his offseason is going to look like. But again, backed into a corner. Pierre-Luc Dubois came out of that one well ahead. This is not a Pierre-Luc Dubois-esque return, but this is another situation where a player wouldn't sign with you, and you kind of you make the best out of the situation and replenish your prospect pool by getting a right shot center, which I think is huge as well. Brad Lambert, is he a center? Is he a winger? That debate can almost kind of end in 3 years if Brayden Yager becomes a center and is a good 2C, right? Or maybe Lambert and Yager are the centers of the future for the Winnipeg Jets. There's a lot of possibilities here, and I think, yes, losing a player like Rutger McGroarty sucks, and it's easy to sit here. I want to make this clear too. It's easy to sit here now that McGroarty's gone and be like, and kind of undervalue him. Like, I did a prospect rankings, and he was the top prospect in my rankings for Winnipeg Sports Talk. I still think he would be the number 1 prospect, and Brayden Yager is not the number 1 prospect. So if you take it like that, the Jets lost this trade, but there's so much more to it. There's so much more context, getting backed into a corner, still getting a prospect, a first round pick. Like, I think this turned out okay, even though the Jets were almost always bound to lose a Rutger McGroarty trade, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think kind of pivoting now, because we can talk about the exchanges of value and, what their floors and what their ceilings are. But I think what needs to be recognized is the fact that Rutger McGroarty is no longer the Jets' problem. He can, especially too, or they'll see him twice per year because he's playing in the East. But now we can the distraction's gone. I think that's huge too, because obviously there's the Ehlers stuff still, which still has to be figured out, which at this point, I don't think it does until, trade deadline or he walks, whatever. But there had to have been some sort of looming thing, especially over the front office, that essentially, like, okay, we didn't solve this during the summer. We are now, 2-3 weeks away from the opening of training camp. What are we doing with this? It's got to be a weight off their shoulders. But now I want to get your thoughts on Yager, the prospect himself, because I like him as a player. I think the thing for me is he has a similar floor in terms of where he would end up in a lineup. I think he's a middle 6 guy, which is, fine, because I think that, I don't think Rutger McGroarty was ever going to be a top line guy either, right? So in terms of his attributes, I like a lot of what he brings, but in terms of what you've seen, what's sort of the thing that stands out to you?
Yeah, I posted about it last night on Twitter, and I did do some viewings of Brayden Yager just to familiarize myself with the prospect. It's the shot. Like, you watch his highlights, and yes, when you read scouting reports from Scott Wheeler, who we've had on the show before, or things of that nature, they do say that he has plus playmaking, plus vision. He can do that. He puts himself in good areas, things like that. But only 35 goals last year for Moose Jaw, and I say only because I think that was like 18th in the WHL in terms of scoring. And if a guy's number 1 asset is his shot, you don't want it to be 18th in scoring. But I think that also just kind of speaks to how well-rounded of a prospect he is. And I was texting with Liz Hood as we're getting ready to do another deep dive. We're going to be doing Brayden Yager, of course, because this is the talk of the town now. But you read scouting reports, it's just not really a negative. Like, he's a willing and able penalty killer. The defensive game is apparently strong. I'm not sure if those reports are accurate. The shot is there. The playmaking's there. The skating is there. He's a better skater than McGroarty, even though that's McGroarty's one big knock. But it just feels like his floor is really high. Same with McGroarty. Like, it felt like McGroarty, no matter what, he would be an NHL player, even if the skating didn't really work out, because he could at least be an effective bottom six player. Yager's kind of the same way, as I think he's just kind of a do-it-all Swiss Army knife kind of prospect. But if there is one thing, I would say his shot. With the limited viewings, I know they just made the trade yesterday, but what were your first impressions of Yager, the prospect?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to see that shot and be kind of wowed by it. He can, his release itself is very quick, so he's able to get that shot off in really tight spaces, which is, such a big thing, especially for a center when you're going to be in the middle of everything, right? So you get that, but, I did see a lot about, his defensive game. And a lot of it is him less so being like a physical, presence on the ice, but getting into that sort of back check area where he's able to break up passes. He's able to pressure guys from behind so that pass doesn't even happen. Stuff like that. It's very smart play for someone who is, at his age. And that's the type of thing that's going to make him, advance up through the organization. And I think it's going to be something too that if he holds on to in, his once he gets to the professional ranks, he could profile to be like a Brian Little type center where he can, be a guy who can score every once in a while. He can hold it down in the second or third lines. He's not a slouch defensively. And frankly, I just like to bring up Brian Little. But yeah, like I like a lot of what he brings in terms of his, his shot and, being able to be smart on and off the puck is something I look for a lot in guys of his age. And, to see it at such a high level at this point is really encouraging.
Yeah.
I think the next big thing that came out of the day was a lot of what we all thought was the sole issue behind, this whole situation that was squashed in front of us.
Yes.
That was, Kevin Cheveldayoff, pulling back the curtain a little bit. Before we get into Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments, we have a couple of words from our sponsors, DraftKings and BetterHelp. So we're going to hear from them, and we will be back in just a couple minutes here. Know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only like 2 days the whole year without a game. 2! With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier, any simpler. And if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Deposit and eligibility restrictions apply. See terms and responsible gaming resources at dkng.com/base. This episode of the Level Flight Podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there anything that you just have to do in your self-care routine? Are you someone who needs to take that extra time to accomplish those things? Maybe it's going for a run, setting aside some time to get into a good book, or even dedicating some space to therapy. With busy schedules, however, it can be hard to prioritize those self-care activities. And that can be tough on someone, making those little activities just all the more important. What's also important is to recognize that if therapy is part of your must-haves in your self-care routine, realizing that therapy is something that isn't exclusive to people who have experienced trauma can be a valuable way to work through your needs that are specific to you. It can help establish healthy habits, coping skills, and allow you to reframe some of your own viewpoints on your experiences to become the best version of yourself that you can be. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. And welcome back in, everyone. Thanks to DraftKings and BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. Connor, you were, live tweeting the whole situation. You sent some very confused messages to our group chat. I'm going to let you take the floor here right off the bat here. What did you make of Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments right after the trade?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was just as shocked and as puzzled as everyone else, I think, is my initial answer to that. I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff was taking us through the Rutger McGroarty situation and how it all unfolded. They first heard about things at development camp and the draft combine and his agent. And the explanation that Kevin Cheveldayoff received was that it didn't feel right. And that was the only answer that Kevin Cheveldayoff said he received from Rutger McGroarty's camp. So I immediately clipped it and posted it, but I was just dumbfounded. Like, what? It didn't feel right. That was it. And then Murat Atesh, shout out to him, later on in the presser, asked Kevin Cheveldayoff, had you or Rutger or his camp or his agent or whoever had any conversations about playing time, his path to the NHL, any assurances being made, anything of that nature? One sentence: we never had that conversation once. End of quote from Kevin Cheveldayoff, which is unbelievable because that was the story that was being pushed out there, was that Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets weren't going to guarantee Rutger McGroarty a spot, and therefore he wants out. But the real reason is even more confusing because it just didn't feel right. And the most puzzling part of all of this is that Kevin Cheveldayoff said that it started at development camp. If you remember development camp, Rutger McGroarty and Colby Barlow were attached at the hip. He was loving everything. He was signing autographs for every single fan. He always had a smile on his face. He wouldn't stop talking about how much he loved Winnipeg and how much he loved his experience there at development camp. And that is when it all started. And it just didn't feel right. That's the only explanation. Like, are you as confused as I am? I have more questions than answers now after Kevin Cheveldayoff spoke. I have no clue. I have no clue.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there was also too, like, I mean, it was tongue in cheek, but the little clip of him at the U.S. World Junior Showcase where he said his favorite team has and always will be the Winnipeg Jets. How do you go from making those types of jokes, having the development camp with the fans like that, to when I put the jersey on, it just doesn't feel right? Like, I don't know.
That's not an answer. Like, Kevin Cheveldayoff said that without saying that, but that's not an answer. That's Huss on Winnipeg Sports Talk on Friday basically said, don't you owe it a little bit to the Jets to kind of give them the reason as well? And I agree with that thinking. Like, if you're Rutger McGroarty, if you're Cutter Gauthier, which Gauthier did the exact same thing, by the way. He didn't really give a reason either. But don't you kind of owe it to be like, hey, you won't assure me NHL playing time next season, so I don't want to be here. At least the common courtesy of being like, hey, this is what you screwed up. No, it's just, it didn't feel right at development camp when you were the star of the show and your best buddy, Colby Barlow, and you were all over the socials and having a great time. Like, and Mike McIntyre was also in WST today, and he felt slighted because he was covering down at the Frozen Four, and McGroarty and his family and everyone was saying all the same things, how excited he was to come to Winnipeg, how much he loved the city, how much he loved the Jets. And then this all it just didn't feel right. It's unbelievable. I would have never guessed it's not a reason, but I would have never guessed that would be why Rutger McGroarty's never going to be a Winnipeg Jet. It's so weird.
Yeah. And it's also the thing too, where that's the reason that he decided to stay in school. Like that is insane to me. Cause I mean, like, it's almost like you're talking to, a kid about trying to do something he doesn't want to do. Right. Yeah. Like if you've ever talked to a child and you're like, hey, let's go do this. And they essentially give you a non-answer by saying, I just don't want to. Typically that's not accepted widely by anyone. And like, that's not me calling, McGroarty, a child, because like clearly there's something else going on here that he has neglected to tell anyone. And, if clearly this is what he said, that's what he feels, whatever, it's done, it's over.
Right.
Clearly he's happier to be in another jersey and, power to him, whatever. It's just the fact that it's such a confusing end to something that has been
Yeah.
going on for months. And all we get out of it is it just didn't feel right. I don't know. It's kind of puzzling to me. And I don't know if there's, much else to say about the situation purely because we don't know anything else about the situation.
Yeah, and I don't think the Jets know anything more about the situation too, which is even weirder. And it goes back to what you said earlier on. Like maybe the front office now feels a little bit of closure and it won't be a distraction heading into the season. Where if they knew, say it was about NHL playing time, and they're like, okay, you know what? Come to camp and earn your spot. Then maybe it's like you're worried about McGroarty. What if he doesn't? What if Scott Arniel is like, there's no way Rutger McGroarty right now is better than Morgan Barron, and I'm going to play him. Well, then you have to make a move to trade Rutger McGroarty then, right? So I don't know. It's such a puzzling situation, and I have more questions now than I did before Kevin Cheveldayoff's presser, but clearly I'm not the only one. Kevin Cheveldayoff himself has more questions about this situation because even he didn't get a straight answer, and I agree. Clearly, there's something else going on that Rutger just didn't want to tell the Jets, I think, because that's not a reason. And yeah, that's where we're at. I don't really have much else to say because I'm so puzzled at this situation, that this is where we're at. And that's why, because this is where we're at. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And maybe down the line, something else comes out. We figure it out finally.
Right.
We solve the mystery as to why he didn't feel right wearing the Jets jersey, whatever. But, I think for now, that's about all we have on this. So we'll wrap it here. Stay tuned to our socials in terms of what we'll be doing in the future. I'm not sure if we're ready to dive back into the regular episodes just yet. I know myself and Connor this week have a very busy week at the ballpark. They're on their final homestand. So there's that. Then we start school the next week, but at least then we have a bit more of a routine, so we can figure that out. But stay glued to our socials. We'll have more, answers on that. So for right now, this is a little bit of a one-off, but we'll keep you all posted. So thanks for watching. Welcome to season 3. Rutger McGroarty is a Pittsburgh Penguin, and we wait for Cole Perfetti now.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and Nikolai Ehlers.
Oh yeah, him too.
Yeah.
All
Although
right,
that one, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll surely talk about that later.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So from myself, Brian, and from Connor, thank you so much for listening to episode 99 of the Level Flight Podcast, and we will see you when we see you. See ya.